Andy Johnson. We're going to look at a study which describes or examines the limitations of word accuracy for reading. But in part one, we are going to look at some thoughts on systematic phonics instruction and understanding the idea of scientifically based reading research. We'll be examining in part two a very interesting study by Cousier. I'm not quite sure if I pronounced that correctly, and you can see the citation for the study right there. I would also highly recommend this book. I think it's written in 2014 by Stephen Cousier. Very interesting, helps you understand the process of reading. But first of all, thoughts on systematic phonics instruction. Cousier's study points to the limitations of instruction that focuses solely on word accuracy. Now, this does not mean that we need to eliminate instruction or phonics instruction that focuses on word accuracy, but it points to the limitation of instruction that focuses solely on that. Now, the National Reading Panel Report recommends systematic phonics instruction. We all believe in systematic phonics instruction. However, let us define our terms first. Systematic phonics instruction does not mean all phonics all the time. Rather, the National Reading Panel Report said it should be part of a balanced program. We forget that. We focus, not we, but some people focus only on the systematic part, and they misinterpret that. It should be part of a balanced program with opportunities to actually practice reading, practice the phonics that you've learned in authentic context. Systematic phonics does not mean adhering to a scope and sequence chart, where you start on one end and all students move down the conveyor belt in linear fashion in a series of skills, whether students need them or not. And systematic phonics instruction does not mean implementing someone else's program with fidelity, where teachers are told to follow the instructions exactly as written. This is an example of educational malpractice if fidelity is interpreted this way, because students are not standardized products. Teachers need to be able to make decisions to adopt and adapt any program to the needs of their students. So systematic phonics instruction means correctly a defined process in place for deciding what, when, and how things are taught. A systematic process in place for observing students, for monitoring progress, and a systematic process in place for documenting students' progress. That's what systematic phonics means. Now, let us understand the scientifically based reading research idea. In 1999, the 1999 Reading Excellence Act changed the nature of what is federally funded. Now, up until that time, there was a wide range of research methodologies, including qualitative research, single subject design, survey research, etc. But the federal government came in and they defined what scientifically based research was. Now, they used the same standards for testing medicine, vaccines, etc. that was used in the physical sciences to make decisions about what educational research should be. They wanted to use the causal model, where you isolate variables to say with certainty that one thing caused another. A caused B. This then is reliable. This is the only reliable and valid knowledge, this controlled experimental research. So you can say with certainty that a thing is so. Now, with actual human beings and an actual world, there are so many variables, you cannot isolate single variables to say one thing caused another. But this creates the illusion of objectivity. But within this illusion, immense subjectivity exists, simply in terms of the types of questions that are asked. That's a subjective decision that is made. The types of data that are collected, the way the data are collected. Only experimental research is to be used with control and experimental groups or quasi-experimental groups. Experimental research has random assignments to group. And the manner in which data are interpreted, that is subjective. That is determined by one's preconceived beliefs, by the reading model that one adheres to. Now here's something interesting. The National Reading Panel report, what they define as reading real words in isolation, that's not real reading because you cannot use semantics and syntactics. Reading pseudowords that can pronounce but have no reading, that's not reading. You are not creating meaning. And the pool of research studies, now look at here, they selected only studies, the National Reading Panel report, for coming to their conclusions that used an experimental or quasi-experimental design with a control group or a multiple baseline method. Those are the only types of research considered. Now, the National Reading Panel had some interesting ideas, but you should read the whole report. But their report must be taken with many grains of salt simply because of these very limited criteria used to define what is and isn't suitable research. The federal gold standard for educational groups said that only control and experimental or treatment groups, only research that had that was to be valued with random assignments to groups and a statistical significance between groups. That is the only type of research we use to make decisions about education. And that is wrong. That demonstrates a limited view of what educational research is. Someone described this as methodological incarceration, that you only value research that has this certain type of methodology. It's looking at reading reality through a very narrow peephole. You do not get an adequate view of reading reality or any kind of reality if you limit yourself to a certain type of research. Now, how could anything said to be said to be truly scientific if it ignores or dismisses a wide variety of data that does not conform to preconceived notions? That is not scientific research. Now, some limitations of word reading accuracy that we'll look at in just a minute. A lot of the studies are based on the simple view of reading as sounding out words. All right, recognizing and identifying words. That is a simple view of reading that advocates word reading accuracy. With this view of reading and the research that supports that view of reading, there's an emphasis on sounding out word instruction. When reading is reduced to sounding out words instead of creating meaning. Now, there is a correlation between word accuracy and comprehension. You have to meet a minimal threshold of word accuracy, but the link between word accuracy and comprehension has not been determined to be causal, not a causal relationship, meaning that after a threshold has been met, more accuracy does not mean more comprehension. And in the study by Cousier, we are going to look at that in just a minute.